I've been working on the design of the cover piece that goes over this section here. That's where the turn signals are. They're in the recessed into the pillar. But the when I put this piece over the pillar, I realised that there was a piece missing on the top there, which fits under that, and it also provides the support for the window frame rubbers. Now, what I've made up is this piece here. Now it's just two pieces of timber on the side, and I've used steel on the outside. I don't know whether the original one used timber or steel, but I've decided to use steel. I think it's the better choice. What that does is actually fit over the pillar. Now I'll just go and put that on. Okay, it's on. Now you can see how that actually covers the window frame. In other words, it covers the window frame rubbers. It's held on just by I guess the pressure of the timber against the pillar, but you'll notice, or you may notice, a small hole at the top, a bit of a recess at the bottom. Now what that's for is that the actual cover piece, this one here, that's where it screws into the pillar. So it's actually screwing through this and basically almost through the bottom there. Now there are no other holes in the pillar where that piece there is attached, so I'm assuming it's just these two. And bearing in mind that they're bolts going into the pillar, there should be enough tension on that to hold this firmly in place. Now I'm just going to feed up this and see how that goes and see if there's any movement. Alright, I've screwed everything up. The piece is quite solid when it's held in with those the mounting bolts, so there's no movement at all, so I'm pleased with that. I put an old rubber, just not screwed in place but just in behind that, and it seems to be closing up quite good, so I'm pleased with that as well. Now I could go ahead and cover that. The original covers I think were in cloth, so the appearance would be pretty much the way it is there. So that the steel I've got there is a grey and the upholstery I'm using inside is a grey, so it would look like that. The alternative is that I could cover it in vinyl. I haven't made up my mind yet, so what I might do is to leave that as it is. I'll leave the covering until such time as I'm about to do the window frame rubbers, and I'll make a decision then. So I'm happy with the design. I'm not sure whether it's exactly the same way it was done originally, because I don't have a piece to use as a pattern, but from what the photos show, that appears to be pretty much what is required. I'll probably put some padding on the outside of the cover piece, which will give it a softer appearance, and will also enable it to curve better around the corner. So when I add that, whether it be vinyl or cloth and the padding, it's going to tighten up a lot more. On the right hand side you can see that it comes down very close to where the timber caps are. On this side there's a gap because I don't have the timber cap, and I've only just sat that in there, so that may not be in exactly the right position either. So anyway, I'll leave that as it is. I'll produce the other side, the passenger side, exactly the same, and once I've done that, it won't take long to make one up. Once I've done that, then I'll move on to doing these front door cards, which are obviously much the same as the rear. I mean, they've got a pocket, but they've also got, I'm pretty sure this one has an armrest, so I've got to work out that as well. And of course it's a much larger door, but I'm sure I've got some old cards, albeit rotten, but I've probably got enough to look at there to work out the design for them. So anyway, the first thing, I'll do this capping on the other side, and then I'll start planning on the front door cards. I've only got one of the front door cards. This is the one. It's basically all there. On the bottom here, sort of across the bottom, that's where a piece of aluminium goes with the carpet, so similar to the back, but much larger. Pocket, a little different. It's a lot shallower in this case, and the reason for that is that there's a door armrest in here. Now there's a chrome piece that attaches there, and then the armrest can be adjusted up and down. I've got one of those somewhere, so the aim will be to restore that somehow. The design is similar. You've got the hole recessed in the card, and you have the pocket section in there. So it's much larger. So the principle's the same, but working with a bigger piece is going to create its own problems, particularly with the large hole that's taken out of the middle. So it doesn't leave much of the door card left, so you've got a massive hole out of the middle, and you've got a hole out of the bottom here where the aluminium goes, and then the timber comes down to the edge there. I've got a piece of, I think it's some form of composite board, not very thick, which I'm going to use as a template to get the design of the card. I can't use what's on this. I'll just try and lift this over. As you can see, this card is completely rotten. Water's got into this, all that edge is gone, it's all coming apart, the ply is just delaminating. So the card itself is no good to me, except maybe for the door handle holes. I'll use that to try and position that on my template. I do have enough pieces of the upholstery just to check how it was done, so that's not so bad. So I'll go through the process of pulling this apart and getting enough pieces that I might be able to use as templates. Now I'm going to use this for the passenger door as well, so whatever I get off this, I'll be using the design of this door to make the passenger side as well. Looking at how it was attached, there are at least 1, 2, 3, 3 screws through the card into the door on the front end. There appear to be 1, 2, 3, 5 on the rear. And it's got 2 in here. I don't know why there'd be 2 in there. That doesn't seem to be the proper design, although maybe it is. I'll check on the actual door frame to see if there are holes in the door frame matching where they are. Oh, and there's one on the back here. Maybe they're put there to hold everything tight against the card. As I say, this large hole creates I guess a bit of a problem in how it's all going to stay together. Maybe there was a need for these additional screws, although these ones I can't imagine are the original ones. They've got flat washers under them, and dome head, I assume they're bolts going through them. I would have thought they'd be a cup washer arrangement. Anyway, I'll start pulling this apart. At the same time I'll start working on the door card template. See if I can get that sufficiently designed so I can make the proper plywood card that I'm going to use. I'll be using a thicker timber than this was, as with the rear. Maybe that'll add to more strength of the card itself. But anyway, I've got something to start with, and I'll just start pulling this apart. I made this wooden template out of a piece of scrap lying around the garage, and it was made against the remains of the door card, so it wasn't ever going to be exactly right because of the amount of rot in the door card. So I've put this on, and I've just been around. You probably can't see this, but where it actually hasn't lined up with the door frame, I've actually taped some paper on the other side of this. So the actual door card has got to be out to there. So I've got a piece of paper in there filling the gap. So it was out there, and it was out on the back edge from the top down to the bottom. So I've once again got a piece of paper down there. So now I've actually got the approximate shape, and I'll be using a piece of ply, same sort of ply I've used on the other doors. It's about a 7mm thick ply, so it's quite solid. The difference in this card to the rear is obviously the size, and also the size of the hole. It's an enormous hole in the middle, which I guess will pose some problems in terms of strength. The original card had bolts through here. Now that they didn't go into anything behind that because it's all open behind this, but there was a bolt there and there was a bolt over there, and they were actually used to put through and hold the elastic. Now I don't know whether I'll do the same because I'll be using staples to hold that elastic in place. The pocket, of course, doesn't go much above this level, so it's only a very shallow pocket. But also on this door, as I've mentioned, there's an armrest. Now there's a bracket that screws into these two holes there and comes down here somewhere, and it's got an adjustable armrest that will go up and down. Now I've got one of those somewhere, I just need to find it, and hopefully I can replicate that as well. On the bottom here is where that carpet goes, so I guess you call it a kit panel. The piece that goes on that goes on the other side, of course. It's this aluminium strip. Now it's quite long and quite oversized. It goes well into the timber, so it gives me something to screw onto. But looking at the holes on this, they are also used to screw into the, you can see a couple of holes in here. That aluminium, in other words the carpet, will screw into that and hold basically all of this in place. I don't think I need to put a screw through there, but I'll look at that once I've got a bit further on. I'm pretty sure the aluminium, these two screws of the aluminium will actually hold that firmly in place. Not much more to do at this stage, so I'm ready now to cut this out, and then I'll start to do a final shape. So it'll be a little bit oversized, and I'll make sure that the fit is quite tight. Once I've got the shape right, then I'll look at where these screws will be going in to fix this card in place. The other thing I need to do on the card, of course, is the little brackets on the back of this, one around here somewhere and similar on the other side. They're the ones that there'll be a dome head screw screwed into the door frame, and then the little bracket's got a hole in a slot. You then put the hole over the dome nut, and then you push that up, and that locks this in place. So there wasn't a need, or they didn't see a need to put any screws further up. I don't know whether I'll need to put one up there. Maybe I do, I'll see with that. The other thing I've got to do too is to, and I haven't done it yet, is to cut out the lock, what's that, where the locking plate on the door frame slides into the locking mechanism. So I've got to cut that open. I've probably got to cut that fairly wide, not just the opening, but there's a chrome piece on the inside of the lock plate, and I'll fit that around that chrome piece, so that's got to be cut out as well. That'll enable this then to sit back against the door. So anyway, there's a fair bit to do, but it's going to be a little bit time consuming to fit this to finally shape it, but it's yeah, not all that difficult. Now this is the final door card. Still got a little bit to trim. There's a little bit protruding on the edge up in here and down in there. It'll expand the hole for the door handle. Bit of trimming around there. A little bit of trimming there. So as I say, it's very close. So I'll take it off again, and then I'll get the plane out, and I'll plane some of the edges and maybe file that out. So it's close now to working out where I'm going to screw it, and also to set up these clips. So I've got to get the position for those. That's always a little bit tricky, but what I'll do is I'll screw the screws into into the frame there, and then I'll put this up and then try and I'll probably tap it so I can get an impression of where the holes are. So once I've got those in, then I can get the mounting screw positions in and make sure they're all right. As I've said with the rear cards, it's important to get those mounting points accurate and then mark where they are on the rear, so when I cover it with vinyl they don't get lost. You really can't put them in after. It's just too many problems are encountered doing it that way. So anyway, so there's a little bit more to do before I can get any vinyl onto it, but certainly getting a lot closer. Alright, the door card's almost fitted. I've just got to put the location screws in here. I'll probably end up putting 2 screws. The I may not need it, but I'll put them in anyway. These are the location tabs on the door, so they just slide up and hold it. So it's basically held in position at the moment, and then I've got to put these further screws in to basically lock it into that position. The original brackets were these. That's the way they sit, and you basically locate the head of the screw in the large hole and then just push it up, and then the cup head goes over the smaller opening there. So they're up into position. I actually made new ones. It was a lot easier than just cleaning these up. And apart from that, I don't have any for the other door anyway, so I decided to make up 4 new ones. These holes, of course, won't be seen. All this is covered with vinyl. But anyway, it's getting very close now to be able to put the vinyl on. But I say at this stage I've got a few more screws to go in. I'm not putting one in the centre there. That will tend to warp that panel. Although this one at the rear, it's a bit hard to show it here, but that actually pushes in, and the hole, when that's pushed in, the whole panel is curved. I'm pretty sure I don't need one in there because the aluminium strip on the bottom will actually be screwed into the frame down in there somewhere. So it's getting a lot closer. The card has now been properly fitted. I've only put 2 screws in, 2 on the front, 2 on the rear. That's enough to hold that flush with the door, so I'm happy with that. The screws were a little bit difficult to get in. You've got to be very careful with the frame, because in some parts of the frame you're drilling into the side profile of the aluminium casting, so you actually can't drill through. You're drilling into a solid piece of aluminium, so you just got to position them in enough to be able to get into the thinner piece, which is probably about 4mm thick. Otherwise you've got a captive hole, which is a bit hard to then put these self-tappers into. But anyway, they're in. I'll now mark where these holes are on the other side, and I'll just take this to the other workshop and start putting the vinyl on. I've just put a thin layer of wadding on. It's only patches, bit of offcuts. Doesn't really matter because it's only a very thin layer, and it won't be you won't notice the patchwork underneath. It's all glued on, so what I'll do next is flip it over, and I'll put the vinyl over that and then start tacking the vinyl on. I just need to trim a little bit of it where it's overlapping on other bits that might be seen, so I'll just trim that off, but apart from that it's ready to turn over and start addressing the vinyl. I'm gluing this on a little bit different from the rear ones, and mainly because of the size. It's a bit awkward to just start tacking along one side and then trying to keep the overall shape. It's likely to gradually creep out of alignment, and you end up not having enough vinyl to turn over on the other flanges. So what I've done is just to tack it so it's basically held in position, and then I'll start, this stage I think I'll start off on here and glue that entire seam, and then I'll work out whether I come round the outside, or maybe I'll just tighten this section up and glue that top section there in, and then gradually work my way down the panel. But as I say, the problem I think I'll have with the size of this is if I start pulling things up here, it might then pull it out of alignment down here, whereas with the tacks in place it'll stop that from slipping. And the other thing I've done, as I've mentioned, I've marked the position of the holes, so the distance from this point to where the hole is. If I end up covering those, I can actually find the hole, and then just put one of these pointy things. I think it's for pushing through vinyl or leather to sew it up. Anyway, that goes through easy enough, so it'll enable me to do that. But this stage I'll start on the top and then see how I go. Putting those initial tacks in place actually helped. None of the vinyl slipped as I was going around and tacking it and gluing it in place. Basically I started up the top, then down the sides, and then into the top section here, and then finally onto the bottom. It's come out quite well. Turn that over. Padding's doing its job. It's a nice soft feel. So now what I've got to do is to make the piping for the inside here. It's quite a long piece, but I've got enough material to do that. But I'll take all these tacks out because they're just in place and sort of likely to get in the way, because it actually catches on the cloth on the table there. So I need to take those out, make this piping, and then work towards the making the pocket section. So it's coming along nicely, but still a lot more work to do on it. It's time to start the piping. It didn't take long to cut it and sew it. Now I actually have to tack it and glue it, I'll start on the bottom here and go around. It'll end up similar cuts to this to get round the curves. That's the difficult part, just curving it around without bunching it up. And at the end here, I won't know how much of this is going to overlap, but I actually have to overlap the two pieces. Now that piping, I'll end up cutting that out depending on how much overlap there is. So it actually overlaps like that. That's the join. But as I say, I won't know how much of that to do until I get to the end. It also means that I can't glue this piece down at the end until I'm ready to make that join. So I just need to mark how much of that I'm not going to glue. So I'll start tacking from there. I've got to leave that open so those two pieces can slide together. Anyway, it'll take quite some time, so back to the gluing and tacking. Well, the piping's in place. The only problem I had was the bunching up of the piping around the tight corners, particularly the bottom two. Now, they've probably can't hear, you might see that. I'm hoping that when I put the backing on, some of that will come out. I mean, it all won't come out. It's going to have little pinches in the piping, but there's nothing I can do about it. It's not so much in that one, but hoping that will push out a bit, but we'll see. It's not too bad anyway. I'm not worried about it. With the piping's in place, the next thing is to do the pocket. The only problem with that is I don't have the elastic for the top of the pocket. I've got that on order. I couldn't use the old one because it was all perished. So I've ordered some new elastic for the fronts, but I'll have to wait till I arrive before I can start the pocket, because I need to work on the pocket section next before I can put the backing piece on.